Just not yet, Claudia. Just not yet. No. Kia ora koutou. Welcome councillors, welcome staff, welcome any members of the public. I declare the meeting open for the 14th of December. Can I remain councillors, staff and anybody in the public gallery? This meeting's been live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. Further remind you that all decision making under the Local Government Act affords no protection to councillors, officers or members of the public for statements that may be made in the currency of this meeting that may be subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Councillor White, could we commence with a karakia, please?
Tēnā koe te tia, me koutou hoki ngā memo te kaunihira, me ngā kai mahi, ko tēnei te mihi ki a koutou mō tēnei hui whakamutu mō tēnei tau. Nō reira kei te mihi atu ki a koutou, e pai ana tō kākuhu e toi, engari e karakia poto mō tātou. Ko tēnei te karakia o te kaunihira. E te atu anui tōnu, ko mātou e nei, ina nei atu nei ki a koe. Ke tau mai te māramatanga ki a mātou whakarite mō tēnei rā. Arhina hoki mātou e ki ai te oranga tōnu ki ngā hutanga katoa, ngā tangata ki tō mātou rohi whānui tōnu. Amen. Almighty God, we ask that you give us wisdom in the decisions we make here today and give us guidance in working with our regional communities to promote their social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being. Amen. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Move to agenda item 2, apologies. We have no apologies. We are all present. Agenda item 3, public forum. There are no public forum. Item 4, items not on the agenda. Can we note that 9.3, adoption for audit of the draft LPT consultation document and supporting material. Then item 10.3, statement of expectation was delivered under separate agenda as opposed to the main agenda. Order of business, there's no change to the order of business. Call for declaration of conflicts of interest.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you. I'd like to read this one out. It's important. As the Director of Quayside Holdings and Quayside Securities, I declare a conflict of interest on items 9.3 concerning the long-term plan and consultation document on matters that pertain to Quayside Group of Companies, and 10.3 concerning Quayside Holdings and the statement of expectations for 24-25. For the avoidance of doubt, as both items are decisions, I wish not to be expressing any view and participate in the debate and will abstain from voting on both items at the meeting. I would, however, be available to answer questions if required in my position as a Quayside Director.
Thank you, Councillor Crosby.
Chairman, I shall cite the same declaration, just that we're on the same page, our colleague Stuart and myself. As a Director of Quayside Holdings and Quayside Securities, I declare a conflict of interest on item 9.3 concerning the long-term plan and consultation document on matters that pertain to the Quayside Group of Companies, and item 10.3 concerning Quayside Holdings Statement of Expectation 2024-2025. For the avoidance of doubt, as both items are decisions, I will not be expressing any views by participating in the debate, and I'll abstain from voting on both items in this meeting. I'll be available to answer any questions if required in my position as a Quayside Director. Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Thurston.
Chairman, item number 9.4, Te Whare Te Aonga o Te Arawa. I'm the chairman of the Museum Centennial Trust. My colleague, Councillor White, is also a trustee, and I would just seek your direction that we be permitted to listen to the discussion, not participate in it, but be available for points of clarification and take no part in the votes on the two recommendations on page 41.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. You sought my direction. My direction is outlined as you have put on the table, that whilst you've declared a conflict of interest, I think it's appropriate you remain in the room. You're available to answer questions if there are any councillors, but when it comes to vote, I think you should abstain from voting on particular issues. Councillor White.
I respect that, Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I support likewise Councillor Thurston's comments, except that I would like to give a history on the museum, if that would be appropriate from the council's point of view, without casting any particular position, but there's a particular history behind that I would like to share.
Thank you, Councillor White, and that's in alignment with the ruling that I've made. And similarly, Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, item 9.7, declare a conflict of interest in terms of RPS change 6, being on the hearings panel. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
noted.
Similarly, myself, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Any other conflicts? So similarly, in terms of the conflict of interest, from my perspective, in terms of agenda 9.3, which is the adoption of the LTP consultation document, I'm attending this meeting as an elected member of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. As you know, I'm also a director of the Port of Tauranga as one of the council's representatives. I advise that I do not consider there's a conflict of interest for this meeting. As mentioned by my colleagues, I'll consider the matters being discussed with an open mind, bearing in mind my role as a councillor. I've taken independent legal advice concerning this matter. I further advise this meeting that I've declared to the Port of Tauranga Board my role with the council, and I do not intend to vote or participate in any discussions that the Port Board may wish to have in relation to this proposal. I have no financial interest in the Port of Tauranga or Quayside Holdings perpetual preference shares. Right, those conflicts are noted. Thank you, councillors. That leads us through to public excluded business to be transferred in the open. The note here is that essentially there is none, but the Chief Executive has suggested item 10.3, Quayside Holdings Limited, Statement of Expectations for 24-25 be transferred into the open at the conclusion of this meeting. This will be resolved in the PEX session. Do we need a resolution for that? No? Right, thank you. That takes us through 8.1 minutes of the Regional Council meeting on the 26th of October. Can I have a mover? They've been true and correct record of that meeting.
Happy to move.
Councillor Nees, thank you. Councillor Shirley, second. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Any matters arising out of those minutes? If not, Regional Council minutes 22nd of November. Councillor Nees, Councillor White. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Any matters arising from those minutes? No, thank you, councillors. Reports, Chairperson's report 9.1. I'll move the adoption of the Chairperson's report as outlined starting on pages 28 of your agenda. I have a seconder, Councillor Winters. Any questions to that? No? Right, yes.
A point of clarification on page 30, when you met with Todd Muller, it says you met with him as the outgoing Bay of Plenty MP. It wasn't as the incoming chair of Priority One.
Exactly right. So if we just make an amendment to that, it wasn't as the outgoing MP, it was his role as Priority One. Councillor Nees.
Just a question about the meeting.
Which meeting, sorry?
UNISA.
Oh, yes.
Could you tell me whether or not Auckland City is an active participant in that at present?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Not the matters which used to be fronted by the mayor, but this particular representative, I can't recall his name, the Mayor has delegated it to one of his senior councillors, but they are still an integral part of Unisa. Anything else, councillors? Otherwise, the adoption's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Uh, 9.2, adoption of draft regional navigational safety bylaws for 24. Welcome, Tony.
Morena, councillors. I'll take the paper as read, but the brief synopsis is in December last year, a committee was put together by this council to oversee the review of the current navigation safety bylaws. That committee has spent the last 8 months learning about and talking through the review and a number of clauses and potential options for consultation. We're now at a point where the committee had a meeting in November where they endorsed a draft consultation document and now recommend that the Regional Council adopt this draft for consultation over the summer.
Thank you, Tony. So I am going, as councillors know, there was 2 councillor representatives on this hearing panel, the 4. So we have Councillor Nees, Councillor Von Duddleston, who was chair, Councillor Winters and Councillor Eaty. So I'm going to ask Councillor Von Duddleston to give his views in terms of the adoption of this report.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move the motion that we adopt this report. There has been substantial work done and using a technique of cooperation and effective co-governance in this hearings committee. The disappointment for me as chair is that we haven't managed to we were asked to use Tikanga Māori to meet with some of the issues with some iwi on their marae, and that commend our staff for the work they did to try to get that to come to fruition, but we haven't been able to do that. So that said, it's an unusual process for hearings panels to go and talk directly with potential submitters. So it was a new technique, should we say, that was fraught with a bit of danger from a hearings commissioner point of view, because normally, like the process with the LTP, we're there to make no predetermined conclusions and be very careful what we say to the general public until we get into the hearings process itself. So with that, I commend the work that staff have done to get our hearing panel right up to speed on where the law sits and what our responsibilities versus the maritime law, for instance, is. I think they've done a very good job at making sure that we go into this hearing. It's been a very truncated process, but well worthwhile, I think, in that our hearings panel will be going into it with a very much better understanding than they would have otherwise. So with that, I move the adoption of this. That's a recommendation, isn't it? Just can't. Yep, it's a recommendation. I move the 3 recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleston. It's been moved. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to second, but there was a few queries I sent through to staff. One of the maps was incorrect, I believe. So could you just talk council through the changes that may have been made document so that we know exactly what we're signing off?
Yes, thank you, councillor. I actioned all of those suggestions. The map has been updated. So there is a speed uplifting at the mouth of Kaituna River, and that has been changed. Also, I think it was the status quo option for Kaituna River was slightly reworded so that it made a little bit more sense, as you suggested. So those have been incorporated into the statement of proposal, which I can give you a copy today if you'd like.
So thank you, and so I'm happy to second that motion, Mr Chair, but I'd also like to raise that at the Te Mara o Kaituna meeting, all representatives of Te Mara asked that they be sent a copy of the bylaw, and that is because they won't be having a formal meeting before the closing of the consultation period, and so the various partners within Te Mara o Kaituna would like to have a look at that, and their hapu will, or iwi will then make a separate submission if necessary, and perhaps a combined submission for Te Maru, because they're obviously very concerned about the Kaituna River and are very invested in the choices that are made there.
Thank you, councillor Nees. Councillor McMillan, then McDonald.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, but in Committee Māori this week at Tuapero Marae, they raised the point about ships in a holding pattern in front of Tahua Island, and their view to Tahua is blocked by ships waiting there. And of course, it's not a safety thing, so I appreciate that it might not be relevant now, but I just thought I'd mention it, and I don't know what we do about that, whether there's something that we can do, but just noting it.
If I may comment, good morning. I'm aware of this issue. Unfortunately, we are very constrained by where we can put anchorages in terms of seabed, effect on the marine life. So not much really we can do. And it's not a safety issue from our perspective, so really not much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Response to Councillor McMillan. It's not what I was going to raise, but just a response. In the smart growth strategy, there is a provision in there around view shafts. So maybe it is through smart growth that we address the issue that that was raised at Komiti Māori, and that's something that I'll pick up and take to the smart growth combined tangata whenua, because I think the provision can be made through that smart growth strategy, so it's not obstructing the view shaft for those hapu in that area because of the cultural significance and connection there. So thank you for raising it. My question is just to Andrew, and I guess my concern you expressed around the difficulty it was to go and address tangata whenua on the various marae, and just exactly what was the difficulty in that. And I guess I raised that as a concern because Komiti Māori do have meetings on the marae, so it could have been an avenue or a pathway that the panel may have used to introduce what was happening in the navigational bylaws using the same process that Komiti Māori uses. And I guess it's just a heads up for, I guess, future panels that are looking to liaise with hapu iwi.
In response to that, Mr Chair, our hearings panel were not involved in the discussions, but we were informed by staff of their efforts that they had made, which were substantial, to exercise a meeting with the hearings panel, and that was not forthcoming. Now, the details of that, not with me per se, but just that was reported to our meeting.
Thank you, Mr Van Nuttleson. So I've got Councillor Scott, Winters, Campbell, and then Eaty. Councillor Scott.
My question is just a clarification, so that in response to the changes that Councillor Nees raised, so am I to believe that the documents we've got here are not the documents that we're approving? recommending.
The documents you have there are 99% of what you're adopting. What you're adopting is the slight difference made to one map. So the statement of proposal, I think it's option 3 map, now has a blue indicator at the mouth of the Kaitūtuna River to indicate there is still a speed uplifting there. And the option 1 status quo proposed for Kaitūna River, which is status quo, or keep things as they are, has the words "and" taken out to ensure that each of the points proposed is a statement in and of itself as a clause, so that it reads, it's more understandable as a whole clause. So there is no substantive difference or change of direction in the documentation. It was edits and updating a map. So I can assure you there's no changes to what we're proposing from this document.
Thank you, Tony. Response?
Yeah, page 36,
Mr. Bondalson.
item 9.23, part 3, delegates to the chair and deputy chair of the committee the ability to sign off the final draft prior to the presentation to regional council. So we have always had the ability before these things of final to make sure that we've got all our editing right and we don't have to come back to full council for it. So that's within the delegations already.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleston. Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. So on earlier this week, Tony and the team presented to Rotorua Lakes Council Rotorua Community Board on the draft navigation and safety bylaw. So we're already out there engaging. And in terms of our consultation, this is going to be outside the normal LTP process, Mr. Chair. We're doing this a little bit different, very short, sharp, and we're going to have people at our boat ramps over most of the summer to get feedback from our community. That's great. The fines is often an issue of contention. And again, that is going to be outside the gambit of this documentation as well. And we've already spoken, or we part of this, Tony, can you make sure that TALT get a copy of this and we engage with them as well? That was a bit of a criticism on earlier this week from TALT that we hadn't done that properly, and I'm just conscious of tangata whenua views. I mean, we had Raywin Bennett on our hearings panel, and so I'm happy to support the recommendation, Mr. Chairman. This has really been for those non-boaties, it's been quite an education process to bring people up to speed in terms of boat language. And this review is a little bit different this time because we've got a lot more toys to play with in terms of foiling boards, boats, toys that is sort of hasn't been there in the past. So we have to get our heads around that of new foil toys, which will all have to comply with this bylaw as well. So we just have to make sure people come up to speed really quickly. But happy with the process, happy to support the process, and I encourage my colleagues to support it as well. Thank you, Tony, for your diligence.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on page 32, I have a bit of a concern about a legacy issue on the Tarawera River. I know a little bit about this because in 1975, I was part of the uplifting of all the river regulations and the speed regulations through the Jet Boat Association of New Zealand. And I do believe there was a bit of an issue a couple of years ago with boating on the river, which was an organised event with children swimming. So I thought that was all cut and dried, to be honest. I wasn't aware of it was being any more of an issue. So I'm just a little bit concerned about the fact that, I've missed that, and I'd certainly want to be helping in any way, shape or form if I can, as the ex-mayor of Kawerau and as the ex-chair of the New Zealand Jet Boat Association of Northern Districts. And I've been approached by the Jet Boat Association since this has come up, and they would like to have some consultation with the board, with the trust, if they can, to rectify the problem. It's more of a instead of not necessarily consulting with the river users at that particular time, but it's something that I've always played a fairly stringent part of letting the council know what's going on, and the boaters being fully aware of who else is on the river at that time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So Councillor Von Duddleston, this is one of those 4 things that further works to be done on it. You're aware of that? You're happy with it? Right, thank you. Councillor Iti.
Kia ora, Chair. Just further to the conversation around iwi and hapu engagement, I just want to assure Councillor McDonald that this was robustly discussed by the hearings panel. And we had requested that staff come back with regards to the process that had been taken and any other steps that could help improve that process. And I agree with Councillor McDonald with regards to Committee Māori and some of the changes that have been recommended in the LTP under Te Amorangi with regards to looking across this entire organisation's processes with regards to engaging with iwi and hapu. Kia ora.
You, Councillor Iti. Councillor Shirley.
I just picked up one on page 32, following on from Councillor Campbell's comments, and that's the final bullet point there under one of the introduction, which says prohibition of personal watercraft PWCs, especially jet skis, from most of Ahiwa Harbour. Prohibition is an absolute term. To actually have the words especially jet skis implies that it's only them, or that there's a lesser prohibition, and you can't have a lesser prohibition. Prohibition is absolute. So the wording just isn't quite right there.
Tony, any response?
Sorry, I don't have the full agenda in front of me, so I'm not sure which clause you're looking at. Is it option 1?
No, it's commentary of those
Commentary
4.
under the introduction.
Right, okay.
4 bullet points
So
there.
there's quite a long history around, I guess, exclusion of jet skis in Ahiwa. It's been quite controversial in the past. Council have been able to exclude certain vessels in the past under the Maritime Act and the Local Government Act, but since that was first introduced, both acts have been reviewed and amended various times, and the mandate for navigation safety that council can apply is narrowed quite considerably, and we now can no longer exclude any vessel apart from whether it is linked directly to navigation safety, in which on the face of it, jet skis is not in and of itself a navigation safety risk. So what we're trying to do is provide options in order to generate feedback from the community, because we find ourselves in a kind of frustrating situation in which we've got such a narrow mandate that we almost have to allow them. But are there other mechanisms in which we can use in partnership with possibly district councils to manage jet skis in particular because of their behaviour? That particular wording, off the top of my head, I think comes from the current bylaws, or it might, and if it's just the explanation, I guess it is prohibition of jet skis that we have at the moment.
Thank you, Tony. So essentially, let's note this is a draft going out for consultation, and this particular issue is work in progress. Okay, thank you. So the recommendation has been moved by the chair, Councillor Von Duddleston, second by another panel member, Councillor Nees. All other panel members are happy with the recommendations. Put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 9.3, adoption of, for audit of the LPT consultation document supporting material. Mr Taylor.
And thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make some comments before Matt and Kamaran answer your questions. I would just like to first of all thank councillors for getting to this point. You have a large number of papers in your pack. You have seen them all before in various workshops, but this is the first time you have seen them all together. It is an amazing achievement for this LTP, but as it includes proposals that look to safeguard the future financial sustainability of the Regional Council. While all the documents are draft today and the decisions being recommended today are to move to the next stage of the process to adopt for audit, I would like to highlight some of the key changes and directions to date. On page 886 of your agenda is the draft financial strategy underpinning this draft long-term plan. It states the main results of this financial strategy are prudent financial planning, maintaining financial resilience to respond to the impact of climate change and other challenges, and keeping rates affordable through cost of living pressures. This financial strategy says one of the main methods that Council has used to maintain levels of services is focusing on efficiency and effectiveness. Over many months, Council has provided direction to achieve substantive savings in this long-term plan and effectively doing more for less. This includes $4.5 million in savings in year one, totaling $45 million across the long-term plan, and $50 million in savings from shared services and other efficiencies. You have looked at every activity. You have reduced funding and levels of services in a number of activities, including policy and planning, where you reduced that activity by 1.65 million, regional development, which had a reduction of $500,000, the integrated catchments activity, 400,000, and you also included cost savings and governance costs of 128,000. There are also levels of services where councillors did not agree to any reductions, and this is notably in activities which support volunteers, flood protection, and emergency management. There is a few activities where increases are proposed, and this is especially in public transport, where a business case is being finalised that includes a step change in public transport in the Western Bay, as well as future park and rides and through routes, buses and Tauranga from 2027. Doing more for less, pivoting to react to new government direction is a key driver for this long-term plan. This agenda is a combination of a long process involving many workshops and briefings, through which we have tried to split the long-term plan into manageable and digestible chunks. Over the series of workshops, councillors have given very clear direction on each component part, and we have put this jigsaw together for you. A further highlight that you'll be aware of is that this draft long-term plan has a balanced budget in each and every year. This balanced budget has not occurred in the recent history of Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and it has been achieved through a combination of reducing expenditure and balancing revenue levers like dividends and rates have achieved this. In the draft long-term plan, there is a general rates increase of 4.8% for the first 3 years. This is a real increase above inflation of 4% in 24-25. Following your decisions today, the next steps are that you will receive audit opinion in late February. You will approve the documents for public consultation in March. You will have hearings and deliberations in May, with the final adoptions of your long-term plan at the end of June. At all points of the process going forward, you can make changes. Currently, the draft long-term plan is on track and on schedule, and it does represent a bold and deliverable as well as financially prudent draft long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And can I just repeat and make sure you note that this is part one of a staged process, which is for audit consideration. And there are several opportunities, as Fiona said, 28th of February, after it's received back from audit, And the big decision is the 6th of March, which is approving the consultation to the community. So as Fiona said, you've got some opportunities. And the next 2 tranches, you can make some alterations to it. I would expect and hope that if anything, they are minor. And you'll see in the recommendation that there is also the consideration in there in terms of one of the recommendations that minor editorial stuff can be done delegated to the Chief Executive. Mr. Taylor.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman, but happy to answer any questions.
Councillors. Councillor Neese.
There are references to the NBA and the Spatial Planning Act in the document, and we have been advised that by end of December they will be gone. So my question is, do we just send the document as it is now to audit, knowing that it will have to be amended and we can do that when it comes back, or is the timeframe such that that change could be amended before it goes to audit? My question is, when is it actually going to audit? Because I'm sure they'll pick that up.
So through you, Mr. Chair, it will go middle of January is when audit starts. I think there are, as you quite rightly point out, there are some signals for changes in legislation that have already come through. I would think we should pick that up through the audit process because there may be others as well. So rather than try to amend this document and pick up some of them, let's make sure we pick up all of those through the audit process. So when you get the document, as Fiona said, early in 2024, that's comprehensive and up to date.
Thank you. And just another question. We were given a huge amount of reading to do, and some of the detail I just was not unable to get to, particularly in the asset management plans. So once the long-term plan has gone to audit and comes back, if we have had time to further review those documents, is there any reason why we cannot make minor changes to those asset management plans?
Reason at all. So I would expect that at that meeting, when you adopt for consultation, you'll be able to make amendments then. Absolutely.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I've got some comments on the consultation document, but I just wanted to check the recommendations that are here. And I understood that we'd given the Chief Executive direction not to do any work on a potential regional infrastructure fund. But that is actually in there as a recommendation number 10. So I'd just like some response to that, please.
Chief Executive.
Yes, this is a recommendation asking if you want any work done on a regional fund. So it's whether you want to direct myself to progress work on a potential new regional infrastructure fund and report back to council. If you do not want to do that, then work will not proceed.
Councillor Von Ottosson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to bring attention when we look at the summary via activity, just recognise that transportation is expected in the 10-year plan to go from 64 million to 98 million, and that is a 50% increase. And we, I don't think we've had enough. It's something that we'll need to look at very carefully as a council, because that's one huge increase in just one sector of our plan that needs some real drill down into it and council input. So it's just an alert today.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Von Ottosson. Councillor Scott.
Just checking on page 779, if my maths is the one that was struggling, because I might have been reading it late last night, but talks about a reduction by the bottom of option 2. I just wonder if it's by that amount or to that amount.
We're just looking it up, Mr. Chairman. So, Kamaran, can you confirm whether it's by or to that amount? Have we used the wrong word there?
Whilst we're waiting for that response, Councillor Winters.
Just in terms of the asset management plans, Mr. Chairman, clause 6, we talk about the draft maritime operations asset management plans. It's for buoys, beacons, signs and whatever, but our boats are not in the asset management plan. Where are they?
Those items are in the asset management plan. They're just might not be separately itemised in the description. But of course, the boats are in the corporate asset management plan. It's just, we don't itemise everything in the wording, but the numbers are certainly in there.
Oh, in the corporate management, so it'd be under vehicles or something, is it?
Other assets, I believe. So yes,
okay.
under the
Page.
corporate assets, but they're definitely in the council's asset management plan overall.
Myron.
Councillor Scott, just to clarify, that's option 2 in relation to the general rates, targeted rates commentary. That's by.
Should be by. Oh, that's good. Most impressive. The second point was about the options on page 806 that shows 3 options for the recommendation on the port, and we've only agreed 2.
Yes, that is a correction. There are 2 options in the consultation document. So we'll tidy up those wording with the delegation to the Chief Executive following this meeting.
And the third and probably the final one is about on page 1139, where there's a reference to, that the proposal was an opportunity to invest in a higher risk return as a reasoning, but in fact, the risk-free return at the moment is about twice the rate of dividends we're getting from the port. So I don't think that would be misleading to our.
Yeah, and more wording that we will correct for the final version. Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. I do believe on page 779 it should be 2, will reduce on average 282, because if you reduce it by 282, the targeted rate will only be about $15 or something. So I do believe it is 2.
Yeah, 3, Mr. Chairman. Can I check that again then after the meeting? But yeah, we will make it the correct by or 2.
Thank you. I've got a number of items that I noted, but I won't bore the meeting with them now. If I can pass them to staff. For example, there's words missing and therefore the sentences don't make sense. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll pass those to you after the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor McMillan.
I must admit, I've got a bit confused now because I'm thinking what we're talking about now is in public excluded, is it not? Yeah. So is this, so in terms of the consultation document, the questions we have we can raise now? Because it just says it's down in public excluded in my, so I don't know if I can find them quickly enough because I've got a number of questions, but they're kind of, but one of them was around, it was again referring to what came up the other day in Committee Māori in terms of our support of volunteers, that they felt that there was an inequity with supporting iwi hapu groups versus other community environmental groups. So I don't know whether in the consultation document how we cover that or address that, but whether there's something we can do there. I'm just going to see if I can find. In the transportation, page 775, I'm just wondering if you look at the way healthy catchments is framed, it's got wording like supporting communities, whereas in transportation we just say operates the Bay Bus network. And I'm just wondering if it should have something in front of it like supporting communities to utilise public transport by operating the Bay Bus network, because obviously we're not just operating it, we really want people to use it. It just is a bit cold, and this may not be appropriate because it kind of gets addressed later, but page 781 the blue writing, second paragraph, returns from these investments are currently used to reduce general rates. But that's not all they're used for. So should it say and invest in regional benefit or something other than, because I'm wondering if the community with that sentence will just make an assumption that every piece of dividend goes directly into rates, but it kind of is addressed elsewhere. So
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, they're good points, and certainly through the shortening of sentences to get it within a page or in summary form here, we do miss out some of those important points. But I think if we work together as a team to make sure that the reason why we do something is in front of the what we do as well, wherever possible, while still working within the constraints of trying to make the document a manageable length, we will work on that as a team for the actual document that then goes out for public consultation.
okay, great. Just a few more.
Whilst you're thinking about it, Mr. Taylor, I think the relevant point there is we consistently say the dividend streams that we utilise in the council here do subsidise rates, the figures there, but it's also providing a level of service that
Which is regional
otherwise
benefit,
we
yes.
wouldn't have got. And if that's captured in there, that's fine.
And as Councillor Macmillan points out, that's captured elsewhere when we explain in a little bit more detail what those dividends do. But in some other places, we just use the shorthand version.
Yeah. So page 37, under risks and assumptions in this proposal, second paragraph, it says, unlike other councils that are signalling making changes to their asset holdings, increased revenue from divestment is not provided in the first 3 years of this LTP. I just wonder if that's kind of a bit financially speak, whether it needs a bit more, it needs to be said in a bit more layman's terms, because I think somebody who's not really got their head in this might just go, to that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mr. Chairman. And certainly this document is written in a format for audit to understand what we're doing.
Yeah,
but you're quite right. We will, I think we said, add the sparkle for community consultation in wording and language, which will be better understood by our community. So we'll work together as a team to make sure we do that.
Great. And then same page, what are we proposing? First bullet point says best benefit for our whole region. I just thought with adding now and into the future, so it's looking long term. And then page 39, disadvantages, second bullet point, says lose majority control rights, but I'm wondering if in brackets it should say, but still retains negative control. I know it's stated somewhere else, but I'm nearly there. And I just still feel uncomfortable in the climate change statement, page 48, how we work, second bullet point. I'm still uncomfortable with the word consider climate change in our decision making. I still think that's quite a weak word, consider, because you consider and then dismiss. I think it should be a word like embed. And I know I've raised this before, but I'm just putting it out there that consider is not a strong enough word, in my opinion, with our climate statement on how we work. So I don't know if that can be looked at. That's me, thanks.
Thank you, councillor. The issue regarding terminology, I mean, as you say, you are consistent, but I think the consensus was, in terms of discussion, that the wording as presented in the document, and you're right, there is further opportunity right through till March. If you can convince your colleagues, you need to change it. But I think that it should stay as it is in terms of this document. Any other questions, councillors? If not, I do not. Councillor Winters.
I'm just going to find it, Mr. Chairman. Ange, the document on page 60, we haven't quite got our options right with the consultation questions, like, for example, that number 2, should we enable Quayside Holdings to sell part of the majority shareholding in the Port of Tauranga? We've given two options, but there's three options on that page. Can we see that final submission form before it goes out, please? Because it's not quite lining up with the options we're given and then the
Yes. Yeah, that was a placeholder, Mr. Chairman, that was sent out last week in advance of our final changes we did over the weekend. But of course, that will be lined up before it's adopted
So
for
it'll be
audit.
changed before it goes out.
Yes,
Thank you.
so
That's all I
once
need.
you've made the decision, we will line up all of the consequential documents
Yeah,
that
same with the regional
flow that.
parks. We're given four options, but there's only three there and
Yes.
a reference number. Yep, sweet.
Councillor Nees.
Just going back to the recommendation 10, Mr. Chair, about the Regional Infrastructure Fund. I do think we need to give the Chief Executive direction on that. I'm thinking that that might be something that needs to be considered after we've made a final decision on any divestment case, and that directing the Chief Executive to do it now may leave the staff to do a whole lot of extra work that may not be necessary. I don't know whether anybody else agrees with me, but I would prefer to wait until we know what our financial situation is at the end of the LTP decision making.
But that's essentially what the clause says.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it has the word after the adoption. So the word.
So after June 24.
Yes.
Back to council after the adoption of the plan. So what I'm saying is I don't want staff to be doing a lot of work on it until we've actually made a decision on the long-term plan. So let's wait until we've got a decision, then we can direct the staff on whether to do work or not, rather than have them do the work now. And then possibly it's wasted effort.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Right, councillors, I do not wish to read all those recommendations. The recommendations are outlined on page 4 and 5 of your document. And I would move the adoption for purposes of audit, the recommendations as out. This is under the separate cover, 9.3 on the agenda.
Chair,
It goes 1 through to 12.
Just a point of clarity, please. I understand that what Councillor Nees is suggesting is the deletion of that particular reference at number 10.
Either that or change the wording so it's clear that no work's done until after we are clear on what our position is at the long-term plan.
Okay, look, I'm comfortable. My understanding was there'll be nothing done until after the adoption in 24. If you wish to have it deleted, then you can have it deleted.
All right, we'll delete it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so with my support, because I moved it, is someone prepared to second the recommendations? Councillor Thompson, which is
Second.
deletion of
Correct.
number 10 there.
Correct.
I'll put the issue. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Councillor, similar to what the Chief Executive said, could I thank you immensely for the effort and the time that you've put into this. This has been hard yards. It's been a long haul. The documentation is comprehensive, and I thank you for the manner in which we've been able to deal with this over the last 6 months or 8 months, isn't it? It's a big vehicle. So and thank you for the staff as well, getting it to this point in time.
We have a copy of Fiona's summary. I thought that was a very good summary that might come in handy for some of our ratepayer colleagues.
Yep, good on.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, thank you for that. So we're trying to get Rotorua Lakes Council on board in terms of a zoom in. Where are we, Fiona, with 9.5 engineering services panel contract? Where's Mr. Townsend? Or can Mr. Ingle do that?
Mr. Ingle can do this.
This should be pretty straightforward. Mr. Ingle, can you manage it? 9.5 councillors referring to.
Thank you, councillors. Of course I can manage it. It is a very simple thing. The procurement panel was put in place in 2015-16 year.
We haven't really changed it in terms of the thresholds since then. You'll be aware our capital program did not do well last financial year, and I'm pretty determined that that won't happen again. So one of the measures that tends to slow us down when we're trying to contract work for capital programs is this threshold. So we're asking for that to be changed, and also a minor change to the people we have on the panel available to us. So there's just 3 additions suggested to you there.
Happy to move the recommendations, Mr Chair.
Moved, thank you, councillor Thompson, seconded councillor White. Any further discussion? Ferguson Planning, that means we still have Harrison, Grierson and Whakatane?
Yes, we do. Yeah, it's just that the Ferguson has split off from Harrison Grierson, so they contract to us in their own right.
Okay, councillor Neese.
Just a question, 100,000 is quite a large amount to not be having any competition over appointment. So
it's not no competition, it's just that we don't go out for an open tender on gets.
absolutely, that's great. Because what I wanted to be certain was that we had procedures in place to make sure that we're still got a process to ensure that we've got the sharpest contracts that we can possibly achieve. So you will be still seeking more than one tender.
Yes, so we go
from a confined list.
from all those people on the panel. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So was moved by councillor Thompson, wasn't it? Was moved, seconder? Councillor Von Duddleston, is that right? Sorry, councillor White, sorry. Any further discussion? If not, we are dealing with 9.5 engineering services panel contract. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. I see we have NASA with us, so we'll go to 9.7 of your agenda. Hearing panel recommendation for proposed change 6, NPS urban development.
Tēnā koutou to the chair and councillors. I'll just do a bit of lead-in before I hand over to Nessa and Samantha. Nessa's our principal advisor and Samantha's our planner who've been helping us with this process. So just a reminder in terms of change 6 to the regional policy statement as to why we are doing this. We are doing this to enable growth and development, particularly within the Western Bay of Plenty, helping relax those hard boundaries in the regional policy statement. So that was one of the key drivers for this piece of work. We are in a statutory process where you've given us direction to notify the change to the regional policy statement. We've gone through the process of submissions, further submissions and hearings. And the key role for you today is as to whether to accept the recommendations as delegated to the hearings panel to bring back to you or not. So I'll hand over to Nessa and Samantha.
Morena, councillors, I would just like to address firstly that there is an error on attachment 2 for the housing bottoms line policy. The total for long-term housing bottom line says 21,000 when it should say 20,090, and the total at the very bottom for the Western Bay should read 42,900, whereas in the report it's 42,990. So those changes will need to be made.
So that's on page 78 of your agendas, and that's a result of different information coming. We've based our information on our housing business assessment, and that information was drawn through for our work. We have gone back and double checked those figures, and we have found those errors which have now been pulled through.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Namuta. Councillors, any questions? If not, can we have a mover, seconder? Councillor McMillan's moved it, adoption of it. I'll second it. No further discussion? Councillor Crosby?
Yes, I've never been a fan of dividing houses by numbers. I don't think it's sustainable, but however, it is the NPS and we do have to work through that process. So appreciate all the hard work that has been done. But we also must understand that, you know, the new government is also giving some signals around repealing current RM legislation, replacing with the old legislation with some tweaks. So we may be back. Basically, I'm just wondering again, that staff need to be cautious, I guess, about this process. You know, you have to do what you have to do at a certain time frame. So it is a very difficult position, again, we find ourselves in, as we will in freshwater and as we will in some other things, particularly probably over the next 18 months, I suspect.
Thank you, councillor Crosby. Right, the agenda items been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Right, thank you, councillors. So we go through to 9.4. I'm advised that we are going to have Gina Runge and Stuart Brown with us at any moment, but by way of introduction, councillor White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm not, as I said, I will not take part in any discussions on the decisions, but in terms of the museum itself, it is the most photographed building in the country and has become the home for Te Arawatanga and treasures and stories. And it's a very powerful stories of collision between cultures. So the building stands in that particular space with Te Arawatanga as part of that. And from Te Arawa's history, I mean, it's the centre of, has been the original centre for tourism. And this particular building has played a huge part in attracting tourists to our particular centre. You know, in a place that's suffered from COVID in terms of the hotels and the motels being taken over, this particular building is seen as an essential part of our story and our future. And as a person who's been involved in museums, I did, you know, lead out Te Papa for 6.5 years and sort of the cultural connect and stories. Likewise with this particular museum, I know that TCC are looking at museum development. I know we heard yesterday, Committee Māori, that there's another plan from Buddy McKinney doing his thing. This particular situation where we're obviously looking at closure around the funding side of things, I just wanted to emphasise the importance of this particular building, and not just a building, as a storyteller, and one that actually doesn't tell stories from the old sort of in the box stuff, but actually tries to integrate connection with communities and bring some reconciliation and understanding in that community. And that's the importance of this. It has a Koeke group, a Te Arawa elders group, who oversee the cultural components of this. They are very strongly looking forward to reinstating their treasures back into that museum, albeit with a whole new vista of experiences. The 28th Māori Battalion B Company has got an exhibition that's rising in that particular space. And again, that particular housing is interesting because it's developed in an Elizabethan style, but it also has a component of that collision between cultures. Now, when you look at the Rotorua Lakefront now, with the development of the big spa and the whole storytelling coming around that building, and that story in that museum is actually the anchor point of a beginning of cultures coming together, and then reflection around the lake and the design of the spa facility and so on. So I just wanted to give a bit of history there around this particular building and what it does mean to Te Arawa, and the context that most people will think that Te Arawa would not want this particular building because it's an Elizabethan profile. But again, it's about being inside the building and being able to talk about your culture inside an Elizabethan style that brings a conversation together, a powerful one. So I just want to put that as part of the history and part of the value of that museum from another context. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, councillor White. Morena Gina? Morena Stewart. Sorry, we've had a conflict of interest declaration from councillor Thurston and councillor White, but we thought it was appropriate that councillor White outline the context, the history and the importance of the whare that we're referring to. So I've got councillor Thurston who would just like to make a comment, and then I'll hand over to yourselves. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'd just like to acknowledge Gina and Stuart up there who've done an immense amount of work on this project. And also I'd like to acknowledge you too, Mark, for your great support and collegiality that you've displayed throughout all of this. Some of us, like myself, have been involved in this for over 20 years. And even Councillor Winters in his term as the Mayor, because the Mayor of the day is always very actively involved in this project. But as Councillor White has said, this is a building of national significance and of international importance, and it just happens to be in our region. And as Councillor White said, it's of huge significance to Te Arawa, and it is the national repository for B Company 28th Maori Battalion. And these were fighters, dare I say, and warriors who represented this particular region in the Second World War. So, colleagues, it has been an immense challenge. Any support or encouragement, dare I say, that you can give us all would be greatly valued. I won't be voting on this because I sit on the periphery of this, as you know very well. But it is a challenge. There's reference in the papers that you've received pertaining to this item that it's all about redevelopment, but be assured it's all about restoration and restoring this nationally and internationally important iconic building. So dare I say, I won't be voting, but I would look forward with great thrill at your support. Thanks so much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. So with those words, Gina, I'll hand over to you. I think the background to this is pretty well understood. This allocation was initially made in terms of the fit out of the museum, and the request here is to transfer that to complement the capital costs of the building. So it's over to you.
Tēnā koutou kia rangatira, e mihi ana kia koutou katoa I tēnei rangi. Thank you for inviting us to speak to the paper. We really appreciate the opportunity to answer questions and outline where we are at on the programme. I'm the exec sponsor for the project, so attending in that capacity, and with me is Stuart Brown, who is the lead for our entire arts and culture portfolio, including and is a former director of the museum as well. Do you want to?
Yeah, kia ora koutou. But once again, thanks very much for giving us the opportunity to speak this morning. And this building is obviously not just to the community, but to the actual region. And just following on from what Tataru said, that a number of World War I and World War II soldiers convalesced in the wider region, to Tauranga Moana and others to recuperate after the war. So it's very much treasured and loved, and extremely strong support for our community to get this project complete and the museum reopened.
I'm not sure if we've got control of the clicker.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm just going to quickly go through. I mean, we've already discussed how important it is. 80% support for the from public in our consultation in July, August. From an economic benefit point of view, this is going to bring 300 jobs over two and a bit years to the region. 70-80% of the contractors we're seeing in our tender submissions are either from here in Rotorua or the wider Bay of Plenty. And it's a significant tourism asset for the region as well. 150,000 visitors to the museum, but close to 700,000 pre-COVID in the government gardens. Over the next slide, please. Thank you. I just want to give an update of where we're at in terms of our funding. So we have confirmed funding of 58.9 million now. We have a further 14.7 to secure. The 4 million from the Ministry of Heritage and Culture is actually secured. We have a letter from the Minister saying the money is secure. We're just working through terms and conditions of that 4 million can be used for. And we have an application in for Kanoa for 5 million, additional 5 million. That will require a paper to cabinet. We're expecting that to go early in the new year. And then obviously what we have before today is to seek approval to transfer the 4.1 from exhibition into the building project. And there's some other money for NZCT's an application for February. And Joanne LaGrue, a very well love of art in the city, strong supporter for the museum, has offered a Goldie to be one of her Goldies to be donated for an auction to raise money. So as you can see, we're at 74.6 million.
The estimate is 79.5, but that 79.5 includes a very large contingency. That price is based on a rejected Hawkins price, plus the contingency number. So it's a very real number as such. And our funding gap at the moment is down to just 5.9 million. Next slide, please. One of the things that we're challenged with the council.
Chairman, just point of order. Can you just remind Stuart and Gina that we're in open session? We're talking about contracts here and construction companies. I don't think you both are aware. We are in public session, guys.
That's okay.
You hear that, Gina?
This part is public information. We won't talk about the specifics around the contingency and the contract.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
So we were asked by council to find a way of being able to progress the build, subject to the funding that we had allowed. So the building has been broken down into three separable portions: a separable portion base, which is earthquake strengthening of the entire building, water tightness of the full building, and full roof replacement. And if I can have the next slide, it might be easier for me to explain this in terms of the layout of the building. Basically, if we're looking at the south wing, zone 1, that was 2011 extension. So earthquake strengthening of the whole building to 80% MBS, full water tightness, fire systems, and then fit out to zones 3, 2, and 1, which effectively at that point we could open part of the museum if we weren't able to secure some additional funding. Separable portion 2 is the fit out in zones 4, 5, and 6. So effectively that is the cafe space, the north wing short-term gallery spaces that are highly utilised, and the remaining of the heritage bars that remain in that wing as well. And then separable portion 3 is to come back and complete the upper level of zone 4, which is the classroom, conference space, and mezzanine floor in zone 3. So that's the separable portions that we've broken the building up and into. I can have the next slide, please. This just gives you an easier view for those that aren't familiar with the details. So pretty much zones 3, 2, and 1 would be open up portion base, and the rest of the building would be earthquake strengthened, waterproof for a new roof, and then the rest will come on as funding allows for separate proportion 1 and 2. Go to the next slide, thanks. So what's next? We're currently in tender evaluation process. So we're right in the depths of that now. We expect to have that completed early January. We're also in a position with conversations with Ministry of Heritage and Culture, Kanoa. Lots of conversations going on this week. We expect to have a tender recommendation for council first week of February, and then with contract negotiations, and then construction begins at a minimum of the separable portion base. And within the tender, we've got drop dead dates where we know where we need to give the contractor instructions in terms of when they can start the separable portion base, separable portion 1 without affecting the overall price. And I think that's it from me, if there's any questions.
So I think probably the main thing I wanted to emphasise is that we've still got fundraising to do, but by doing it in portions, we're able to agree a price now with a contractor across the entire project, but let the work stages in a way that lines up with our funding. So we're going to continue to fundraise. Our key concern though is to get sufficient funding for that first to start the project. And that's crucial. If we don't have sufficient funding to start, then we will have to pause the project, come back at a later time, and that just increases the costs. We would have to go through the tender process again.
Thank you, Gina. Can I just get Claudia to go back to your table in terms of funding, just for a question of clarification. So in your funding table there, you've got the funding position for the Bay of Plenty Regional Council unconfirmed at 4.1. Our LTP in 21 confirmed the application to RLC for the fit out. So is this only relative to the capital cost of the building?
Yes.
And the next question would be, in terms of the fit out, is that not being consolidated into the capital cost of the whole project? Because essentially we have made a commitment, and if this is just to get a further commitment to transfer it to the capital cost of bricks and mortar,
In the original application, the 4.1 million, which is approved, was for the exhibition fit out. When I'm talking about the fit out in terms of scope of the build project, I'm talking about wall finishing, wall finishes, cafe fit out, exhibition space ready, but not the infrastructure and the walls would go in to make an exhibition possible. But if you would like to treat that as the same, then that could be fairly straightforward, I would have thought.
okay, councillors, open for discussion. Councillor Winters, then Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move this recommendation on page 41. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Gina, for coming in this morning. Mr. Chairman, in my time as the mayoralty of Rotorua District Council, we did the 2008 and 2011 expansions, and we wanted to complete the building as to what it should have been built 100 and something years ago, and through Crown funding, and it was a lesser building built back then. We wanted to complete it, and we wanted to restore it to what it should have been built, as I said, 130 odd years ago. This is an iconic building, as Te Taru says. It creates huge visitor draw card to our community. It houses some of the most national treasures that we have, and it has exhibition space to die for in terms of its air conditioning and all those sorts of things that are already in place. So this is a result of the Kaikoura earthquake, not quite up to speed in terms of its structural integrity, and this is to make sure that it is a safe building for visitors, tourists, international visitors alike right across the world to come and see an iconic building and to see some of the fabulous exhibitions that we can have long term. So I encourage my councillors to support this. This is not new money from Bay of Plenty Regional Council. This is just a transfer. We already signalled it some years ago to put 4.1 million in. This is just a transfer to the capital cost. There is a slight funding gap, Mr. Chairman, but when you talk about an $80 million project, to get the next 5 million, I am sure my colleagues at Rotorua District Council will get there between now and then construction starts. So I encourage you to support this and we'll welcome you to the opening when we get there. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation moving forward, and like many of us, we've been involved in these type of projects, and the closer you get to the end, it is actually easier to find that last bit of money. The only issue I have, both Gina and Stuart, is around timing. I understand it was envisaged for our handover in the current form to be around 27, 28. And if that's brought forward, it actually costs this council another 200K a year plus. So I need to know when the call could be on the 4.1 million. Now it's gone from effectively a fit out to, the build, which I agree with. My understanding, talking to Matt and others, that we have utilised in a way the 200K in the early years of our LTP as a smoothing part. That came through workshops. So I just need to get clarity around Gina or Stuart, when you are hopefully all going well and can push that start button early next year, when your expectation would be on the call for our money. And I'm kind of looking for an answer towards the end of the project, not at the beginning, to give you a hint.
So the project with the tender process we've got at the moment, the project is due for completion for public use August or July 2026. So that would be ideally the latest. But I could certainly talk to our CFO in terms of whether or not there could be any later to make that work.
Chair, that's a matter of detail that I'm sure the staff will sort out in some kind of agreement. But providing, we understand that changing the nature of the use will not create a bigger impediment for this council in our own little budgeting for the first 2 years in particular. I think we need to understand that, that's all, but happy to support, that transfer of use.
Thank you, Councillor Crosbie. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to second the motion that's been proposed by Councillor Winters. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my colleague or our colleague, Councillor Thurston. 20-year journey in relation to this needs to be recognised and deeply respected. And I can only imagine what you're feeling sitting here today, wondering if in fact your colleagues are going to come to the party or not. So I certainly am coming to your party. I want to just acknowledge the iconic nature of this and just how wonderful I feel to be able to support something of this iconic nature within our magnificent region. To the Rotorua Lakes Council staff, I want to congratulate you. It's obviously been an arduous journey, but well done. And as you say, any deferral of these matters only puts the cost escalation even higher. So to you all, my congratulations, and I sincerely hope that other colleagues around the table will support the motion that I have now seconded. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Neese.
Well, nothing further to add other than I echo the support, Mr. Chair. It's an iconic building. I've, with great pride, taken international visitors across to Rotorua to have a look through that museum, and the sooner that we can get it up and running again, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina and Stuart, I think you've picked up the consensus around the council table here. The points that Councillor Crosbie made are relevant and pertinent. And as he said, I think from this point onwards, how the respective executives manages this is up to them. But could I suggest, and this is my terminology, this is a bit like the regional council's contribution would be last in, but first out. And what do I mean by that? That in terms of the capital cost, the bricks and mortar, we would be their last contributor on the basis of us retaining the revenue for the consequential interest that we accrue here within this organisation. First out, what do I mean by that? If you are able to secure capital funding for the bricks and mortar without this $4 million, I think you need to be assured that the safe harbouring in that then still could be transferred back to your fit out. But that's a proposal that you need to work out yourselves where the money is best fitted, because you're still going to need the fit out. So
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much for your support. It means a great deal to not only the organisation but the district. And again, we're really grateful for the support that we've had consistently from the regional council on this.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Stuart. Right, councillors, the resolution on page 41 has been moved and seconded. And I think, Mr. Taylor and Mark, you've got the guts of the concept that we're talking about. $4 million safe harbour. How you actually use it, you may want some flexibility about. Happy, councillors? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Oh yeah. That's right. Okay, councillors, 9.6, Welcome Lisa and Greg.
Hello, councillors. Page 51 of your agendas. You will know Greg Corbett, our biosecurity manager, and Lisa Power, our senior planner. So we're here today to talk about seeking your endorsement for the partial review of our pest management plan. The pest landscape has changed since you adopted your last pest management plan. We've got a lot more emerging pests that have come through. So we are seeking your endorsement to progress with that piece of work. I will hand over to Greg and Lisa to see if they want to cover off any key points.
Thanks, Namrita. I think you basically did cover it off. Yeah, so things have changed. There is a mandatory review required 10 years after the plan comes into effect. But as the landscape for pest management is changing, we think some of the issues need to be reconsidered before that 10 years is up. So this report steps out what those issues are.
Just perhaps to add to that, that's looking at addressing emerging pests like gold clam, that's including other wallaby species, that's considering other conifer species as pest, that's tightening up on those management rules about abandonment of kiwi fruit orchards, and some language changes in terms of Kāori dieback in particular. We're also seeking approval for some minor changes to be made as well. So happy to take
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Namuta. Just a question from me before I open it. I mean, wilding conifer was Pinus contorta, but you're not that specific in terms of cutting down pine trees, are you?
Yes, we are. So basically the list of wilding conifers that are named are basically all the problem trees in a wilding state. But what we're proposing here is that for some of the more problematic species, with contorta being the very worst, take that wilding definition out of it. So that would mean that the tree becomes a pest in its own right rather than just in a wilding state.
Thank you. Councillor Winters.
Again, Mr. Chairman, on page 52, happy to support the recommendations 1 to 4. And can I also talk a bit briefly about our Rotorua Lakes Community Board meeting we had earlier this week in terms of the devastation that gold clams could occur in our lakes if they got there. They're not there yet. And, you know, we found out a few years after the fact that we had catfish in our lakes, which is horrendous. We want to be front-footing this. And I'm really encouraged, Mr. Chairman, by MPI and they're not onto it, but they are being proactive as well in terms of stopping these things before they get there. There needs to be, and Greg, you know this, there needs to be a real education program for boaties coming into this region from Auckland, Waikato, Hawke's Bay, that they are not the vectors to transfer these gold clams, whatever pest, into our lakes. They are Tonga lakes and we want to keep them pest free. We've got catfish. We certainly don't want these clams in our lakes. So I would encourage you to support this, to give our team the tools in the toolbox so we can be proactive and getting on the front foot. Mr. Chairman, we don't have any dollars associated in our pest management plan for gold clams. And Greg, whilst you have Rule 7 there to allow us to do that, but I think going forward for the next year, Mr. Chairman, we need to have some funds associated with gold clams.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Von Duddleson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to second or move or second, whichever you need for this recommendation. I just want to raise an issue that came up in Komati Māori yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, which were with regard to woolly nightshade. And, you know, we're talking about conifers here, but in actual fact, woolly nightshade is a massive issue in this region, in that it is the one of the hosts for the old marmorated stinky bug. And if we get that into this region, it would be devastating to our kiwi fruit industry, being just one. And so when you're looking at a review, endorses a partial review, I think we need to have staff just having another look at this. This was brought up at Tomati Maori, I can't remember, was it yesterday or the day before? Tuesday. As a health issue for local iwi. And I think it's this is a great opportunity to have just a relook at that, and it shouldn't require money per se, other than monitoring and surveillance. We actually expect landowners to, if they can't identify themselves, to actually get rid of this pest, and it is critical. So happy to second if someone's moved this report.
I have. Thank you, Mr. Van Oddleson. Councillor McDonald, Nees, and then Macmillan.
Just as staff, I just want to ask a question around the consideration being made to myrtle rust. There was another issue that was brought up at Komiti Māori. It was issue that Councillor Van Oddleson raised, which I support. But it was also around the Cody dieback, which I know is probably in hand, but certainly around myrtle rust. I haven't seen that discussed or covered in any of our pest management programs, which I think it needs to be, because there's a lot of work being done through TMBC around myrtle rust. The Mobile Trust itself has got a 300k project partnership with Scion looking at myrtle rust that's now attacking Mobile, but it's the information that's coming to us is actually starting to spread throughout the whole of the Western Bay and in Rotorua. So I think it's a watching brief for ourselves as a regional council as well.
Thank you, Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A similar question about, I understand the desire to keep this a fairly tight sort of review, but I'm constantly getting complaints about the Good Neighbour rule not enabling people other than somebody that is adjacent to a property to be able to call in and get some action. And the example that I give is the road reserves, where they are abutting native bush. And I'm aware of a situation where there's rampant bamboo, rampant gorse. They're both spreading both down into the native bush, which is covenanted, but not, it's Western Bay land. It's also coming out into the road reserve, and yet if anybody that just walks on the road rings and says to our staff, could you please get somebody to spray that bamboo, they're told no, unless you're a landowner that abuts it, we can't do anything about it. So there's a lady that people keep on going and knocking on her door to say, could you please ring up and complain about this wild bamboo? And it's a silly situation. So I don't know whether we can have a look at the Good Neighbour rule at the same time, because there is a lot of frustration from people that drive around. They see something that they don't believe should be there, and yet they're powerless to act.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Councillor Macmillan.
Matamoana pretty much covered. It was about the myrtle rust, but yeah, they did sort of warn us at Komiti Māori about the impact on the Pahutakawa on Mawao and other places, and the value the Pahutakawa have in holding the coastal areas from erosion, and the impact of that if they start to fall, and also the risk to people if branches are falling on them. So it's not just a biodiversity issue, it's a sediment issue, and also a safety issue. So yeah, is myrtle rust in our, I'm being a bit naive here, is it in our plan currently? Yeah. So I suppose it was really flagged up as a massive issue and a potential future catastrophe, I suppose, with the Pahutakawa. Yeah.
For you, Chair, can I just comment? Myrtle rust isn't currently a pest in our plan.
The program of work that's being led at the moment is jointly through the Department of Conservation and MPI, or Biosecurity New Zealand as part of MPI. It's like most pathogens, it's really problematic, especially this one, given that it's an airborne spread. And at the moment, the main bit of work around is science looking at what, if anything, can be done meaningfully at a landscape scale. So they believe they have some methods of treating individual trees, but treating at a landscape scale is still a really big question about how you do that. So just to comment there, we're happy to look at it further, but it's being an airborne pathogen would be always really problematic to manage. Thank you, Greg. So the recommendation on page 54 has been moved and seconded. No further discussion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Takes us through to 9.8. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Lisa.
Move.
You don't even know who it is. Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Anything to say, Fiona? No?
No, only that Matt and Chris will be acting for you on leave over Christmas, and this is the resolution.
Seconded over here, wasn't it? Councillor Crosby. No further discussion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Right. I'll move we go into public excluded. Councillor Von Duddleston, Councillor Thurston, all those in favour say aye. Against,